Hello students, welcome to this online class. I'm going to talk today on the emergence of existentialism as a philosophical movement. I was talking in other videos that existentialism as a philosophy was not a theoretical exploration, but it's just a very powerful movement began in Europe. Now I'm going to talk about different factors or determiners of this emergence of existentialism as a movement in Europe. Today, when the whole world is fighting against the crisis of corona or COVID-19, I think this is very apt, very plausible to discuss about the determiners of existentialism and how did exactly it begin or emerge in European continent during 1930s or 40s. Now, as I said, that this is a movement, this is not again another ism or theory or philosophical theory. It's a movement to capture human imagination and emotional attachment. One thing is very clear, that why did it happen? What is the exact background of existentialism as a movement? First thing is that the world, when passing through or just after the completion of Second World War, the whole Europe was devastated due to this dreaded Second World War. What happened in fact? I'm not talking about the history of European continent or the history of Second World War. I'm just going to how did it impact on philosophical exploration, or how did it impact to human rationale, human behavior, human thinking. At this moment, I must explore one thing is very clear, is that this Second World War devastated the whole Europe. Economy was destroyed completely. Political institutions were in a severe crisis. Cultural institutions were of no help. They became redundant. Social institutions like family, like society, like cultural groups, they were just in erosion. At this background, human beings became very helpless, thought very helpless. They thought that all these establishments, you know, do you understand how we really think or how we really live our life? Is that there is a sense of there are two predicaments, in fact, that run together in our living. I'm talking about living a life. One is our predicament is that everything is good, people are good, institutions are running good, no cultural bearings are very fine, they will help us, they will give us life supporting system. So in a way the world looks very bright, everything is fine, and then we become very contented, and that is how we go on living a life. Another predicament is a kind of pessimistic predicament. Human beings live in a complete fear, in a constant fear of nothingness. Most of the people, they start believing after the Second World War, because up to Second World War, human beings had great hope on humanity, on human reason, on human institutions based on that reason, and on society that is based on human cooperation, bright side of humanity. But the Second World War actually did not kill human beings. It did not destroy temples. It did not destroy bridges or buildings. It actually destroyed human psychology, human thought, that human beings will go on living. So at this particular moment in fact, so at this particular moment in fact, human beings started to start doubting about their own reason. Because let me tell you again, one thing is very clear, is that up to 1930, 1935 or 40, like that, this is the decade when Second World War was going on. Now up to that, human beings were heavily relying on the on the equipments of science. When I'm talking about equipment of science, I'm not talking about concrete objective equipments of science like machines. I'm talking about the psychological thinking equipments, right? So people started to believe that science and only science can give us hope, can give us peace, can give us progress, prosperity. But then Second World War actually hammered on this particular kind of thinking, that science even cannot help us. But I'm not talking about that politics of science, or how human beings behaved or used science in a negative way, or that or this. But what I'm going to explore here is that human beings lost its hope on human endeavor based on reason. People started to believe that the institutions, the political setups, the social setups, the cultural setups based on a particular mode of thinking is not sufficient to capture humanity. So this is what the basic of crisis that was faced in Europe during the Second World War. And then up to now, you can also understand, if you really think that up to now, means up to Second World War, science has developed a very famous movement in philosophy that started, that is called Enlightenment. So Enlightenment is nothing but dependent on human reason to understand the universe, to understand the human world. And by giving emphasis on human reason, what exactly happened is that Enlightenment ignored other sides of human beings, that is the emotional sides of human beings. People became emotional when they faced a crisis. People didn't think rationally, in that rationally. For them, human thinkings are more important, humane thinkings are more important than rational calculations. But that was not available during the Second World War. And the repercussion was the emergence of existentialism. Why, in fact, existentialism started to capture this side of human beings, human thinking, human living. Now up to that, what happened actually, that human beings were defined on the principle of essence. Now we have to talk a little about what is the principle of essence. And now from there, existentialism actually starts with a very important dictum that is called existence precedes essence. Now I have to explain this very particularly today on this video. What is the meaning of this phrase, existence precedes essence? In fact, this is the crux of existential philosophy. Now up to Second World War, or up to the emergence of existentialism, philosophy, starting from Plato and Aristotle, they were searching for an essential characteristic that could define everything. And this is also the crux of, or basic of, science. Now when science defines a world or any object, it searches, tries to search very essential quality, which is very essential to that object only, and on that basis of essential characteristic, we can differentiate that particular object from other particular objects, right? Now that is called essence, searching for essence. Now from Plato onwards, Plato, Aristotle and other people, and then Kant and other people like Enlightenment philosophers, they started to define human beings. What is the essence of human beings? You must be knowing that Aristotle is famous to define human beings as rational animals. Aristotle thought that this rationality is the essential characteristic of human beings. And on this essential characteristic, on the basis of this essential characteristic, we can define human beings, we can differentiate human beings from other beings. Now this is called essentialism. Finding out an essential quality of anything is called essentialism. Now human beings were also defined on a particular essential quality. What is that? That is called rationality. As rationality becomes the essential characteristic of human beings, now what is the corollary of this, or what is the implication of this? Implication is that any being who does not exhibit this rational quality is not a human being, and on the contrary, any other being who exhibits rational quality becomes a human being. So what happens is, human beings are defined on a particular principle that is called rationality, and that way all other human traits, human characteristics are completely ignored, right? Now human beings were given importance if they exhibit more and more reason or rationality, and they were given less importance, and that will also harbinger their social importance, political rights. If you are rational, more and more rational, now reason can be calculated. You can ask me that how people can be defined, but the question is, now if you exhibit more and more rationality, then you become more and more human being, and on that basis your political rights will be defined, your social status will be defined, your cultural participations will be defined, everything will be defined, right? But then if you exhibit emotional traits, then you are not a human being, you become less human beings. But the question is it not a fact that these emotional traits are also the part and parcel of human beings? This is the question actually that was ignored during this Enlightenment period. Now from there only existentialism started, because I said you before that Second World War devastated or destroyed the very idea that reason can give prosperity, progress, everything to human beings. On the contrary, people could now try to understand, people could realize that reason itself can devastate all other human traits, and therefore existentialism emerges. Why? Because look, let me tell you one example. Suppose you believed on a friend, right? You thought that that friend is a very true friend. Now how do you calculate whether he is a true friend or not? You just use your rational rational calculus, how to determine whether a particular friend is a true friend or not. Now you use all the kind of techniques, rational techniques, and then you thought that he is a good friend. Now suppose, using all available kinds of rational techniques, you decided one day, you came to conclusion with all the techniques like taking axioms, theses, and then derivations, and then come to conclusion that this particular friend is a very true friend of mine. After that, you start believing him, you start acting on his advice, right? After some days, suppose you found that that particular friend is not a true friend, he cheated you, he deceived you, then how do you feel? Look, this is called a mental dilemma, right? How do you feel? You will be helpless, you will feel deceived, you will feel cheated, not because your friend cheated you, but because you become angry or you become reluctant on the principles through which you calculated that friend as a good friend, right? So but normally human beings don't do that. What we exactly do is we start scolding that friend. But if you really think a little more, then you will find that the problem doesn't lie in the friend, but the problem lies in your calculating process, because you used a particular method to determine whether a friend is like that or not. That particular process has a problem, right? So similarly, that happened in case of Second World War II. And human beings as a whole, once upon a time they all were believing on reason, rational capabilities, rational calculations, rational techniques. Now all these things prove to be void. All of a sudden prove to be void. Now how human beings will survive? Gain that hope, because they all felt deceived. That up to now, what we were believing about the world, what we were believing about ourselves, what we were believing about others, what we were believing about our political institutions, what we were believing about the social setups, all were faulty beliefs. Now that actually will crack your psychological, status. You will lose equilibrium in your psychological status. Now, is there any philosophy that will attend this kind of mental turmoil, this kind of mental disturbance? If you go through the history of philosophy, then you will find no. Because all other philosophies before this were influenced by either Plato or Aristotle or Kant or anyone, Enlightenment philosophers, or Bacon or Descartes, everyone. They all were thinking that we should define human beings on the basis of an essential characteristic. And that basically, after a long discussion, after a long deliberation, they found rationality is the essential characteristic of human beings. And therefore, most of the philosophies in the history of ideas, they ignored this kind of mental turmoil. They simply just ignored this kind of mental turmoil. But something has to be done. Existentialism actually comes to the rescue. It says that, look, you can define any object on the principle of essentialism. Find out an essential characteristic, then define that particular object, and then differentiate that particular object from other objects. But that will not be applicable to human beings, because human beings are not captured through any particular essential characteristics. Human beings have different kinds of characteristics through which they can be defined. So what happens here? Existentialism started to believe that existence is more important than essence. So existence means your particular characteristic or your particular character trait. A particular character trait of a particular human being is more important than his essential characteristics. In fact, existentialism believes that depending too much on essential characteristics actually dehumanizes humanity, because we ignore or miss many interesting, many important characteristics of human beings. So they gave more importance on they emphasized, in fact, on existence rather than essence. Now, they believe that human beings first exist. When a human being exists, it is a bare existence. It doesn't have any characteristics. You cannot define a particular human being on the basis of any characteristics. It can be anything, right? So that is what is called existence, bare existence. Now this existence actually defines his characteristics, his character. So we should give more importance on existence than essence. So this is the first crux of existentialism. Now from there, in fact, comes two strains of existentialism. Now I said that human beings lost its hope on reason. Human beings lost its hope on political institutions, its calculative method. It lost its hope on even science, that science can save us during the Second World War, of course. Then what will happen? Here comes one philosopher. His name is called Soren Kierkegaard. You might be knowing him, Soren Kierkegaard, and he is called as a theist existentialist philosopher. Now he says, in fact, in today's lecture I will simply talk about two different types of existentialism. One is theist existentialism and another is atheist existentialism, and I'll discuss about two philosophers on that basis. Now one is Soren Kierkegaard. Soren Kierkegaard actually started to believe that, look, this helplessness which was created during the Second World War, it's not the only instance of helplessness, it's not the only instance of suffering, it's not the only instance of abyss, it's not the only instance of dreadedness in human life. In fact, suffering and helplessness, that existentialist philosopher actually uses a very important term that is called nothingness, right? This is a part of human existence. If you look at the world, then human life is nothing. So from this, Soren Kierkegaard concluded that, look, human endeavor has provided us a make-believe world, a world which appears to be very logical, which appears to be very systematic, which appears to be very equal world, but it is not. What is the characteristic is that the world has a very important characteristic is that is called suffering. Now human beings has to suffer. Then how to overcome this? When it was asked to Soren Kierkegaard said, look, why human beings actually suffered? Why this crisis? Why this illogicality? Why this mental dilemma? It's because human beings lost its hope on a superpower or almighty, or directly said to be God. So the more and more human beings distanced from the idea of God, they embarked on other kinds of thinking process that actually created all different kinds of illogicality. And therefore, what happened is that, look, why Soren Kierkegaard said like this? Because Soren Kierkegaard believes, look, when we become very nervous or when we feel helplessness, what happens? You might be feeling that if you have if you have your parents, then you feel solace, at least satisfied that, okay, nothing will happen, my parents will help me, right? And then when parents cannot help you in a situation, in a particular situation, then from where we find that solace, that satisfaction, that strength to meet a particular crisis, is that we believe that there is a political institution in which I belong to, and if there will be a very crisis, then this political institution will help me, right? And in the ancient period, people were believing that when we will feel problems, then of course God will help us. So that was the ultimate source of our solidarity. That was the ultimate source of our strength. But Soren Kierkegaard believes that the day when people started distancing from this idea of God, whether God exists or doesn't exist, this is not a debate here. Now, because Soren Kierkegaard believed that the more and more human beings lost or distanced from the idea of God, they faced this kind of problems, mental problems. And therefore, when you will surrender yourself to that God, then you will find that solidarity, and this psychological problem you face, the depression you are going to face, they will be overcome. So this is called theist existentialism. We will discuss it later in detail. But then comes another very important philosopher called Friedrich Nietzsche. He says what Soren Kierkegaard believes is not right. Why? Because Nietzsche said that, look, we have killed God. God is dead. Because the moment when we distance from the idea of God, look, idea of God means God's worldview. The worldview which is supported on the idea of God, that the world is created by God, it is managed by the God. Now if anything goes wrong in this world, God will come and rescue. This is the idea. Now Nietzsche believes that this idea has been killed. This idea has been destroyed by the advent of science. Now when this idea has been killed or erased from human mind, now because the failure of science or failure of reason or alternative mode of thinking today, you cannot just go back to that idea of God, because that has been killed. Now if you search God, you cannot find him. So that is the idea of the phrase God is dead. Then what should we do? Nietzsche believes that because God was the ultimate source of our morality, God was the ultimate source of our religion, even God was the ultimate source of our political institutions, even God was the ultimate source of our human thinking. So the moment you destroyed them, you destroyed the idea of God, all these institutions collapse. So you cannot just go back again and uphold that idea, because that idea has been erased completely from human mind. Then what should you do? Now you are in a deadlock. You cannot go back and entangle with the idea of God again, or you cannot move further because reason has been proved, or scientific methods has been proved to be futile. So this is the deadlock. What to do then? Nietzsche believes that at this particular moment what you have to do is that you become the Superman. Now that is the idea of Superman. I will discuss in the next video about the idea of Superman in detail. Now Nietzsche introduces a kind of idea that is called Superman. When there is a crisis, when God is not there for rescue, when all your scientific or calculative institutions, calculative techniques fail to rescue, then what you have to do? Now Nietzsche believes that you have to depend on yourself. You have to bank upon yourself. You have to find out the inner capability that is given in you. You become the Superman. You decide what is good or bad. You decide what is the human fate. So Nietzsche actually, then you can find out the difference between Soren Kierkegaard and Nietzsche. Soren Kierkegaard made us or forced us to surrender ourselves, surrender our identity, surrender our humanity to God. But Nietzsche says, because God is dead, it's futile to go back again. But what you have to do? You become the God. You become Superman. You decide what is good or bad in the absence of God. You become the, So what happens? Soren Kierkegaard talks about a pessimistic idea, pessimistic view of human life. Now Nietzsche actually rescues us. Nietzsche says that you must come out of this depression only if you can take the charge, right? Depend on yourself, you become the hero. Now, you know, this is very important phrase of Nietzsche even. Nietzsche says that you become very potent, very powerful. So Nietzsche makes us powerful. Soren Kierkegaard makes us, a kind of powerless human beings. So this is the difference between theist existentialism and atheist existentialism. Now we will discuss more on two strands of existentialism in the next video. But the idea is that human beings, the mode of human thought is at the stake. What are our axioms of thinking, right? That is more important to lead a life. What are the axioms of thinking? That is at the stake. And existentialism actually hammers on that particular idea, that what is the real mode of thinking, technique of thinking that can give you a fruitful life. Thank you.